Thank you for listening to the Global Sales Leader podcast. I'm your host, Jason Cooper. We're actually going to go into podcast number 2. The reason why we split it into 2, because Paul gave such good information and techniques and ways to do it using the mind, body, and soul in congruence. We thought, and I thought, to split it into 2 sections, podcast number 1 and podcast number 2, so you can chunk it down and get some really good bite-sized knowledge, and so you can present yourself in a better way with your clients and have the best experience you possibly can. This is global stuff. This is really, really top stuff. So you got to listen to it and you got to practice it. I've done it. I learned a lot. I've learned even more so in this podcast as well. So I hope you do as well. And I look forward to seeing you at the end. Enjoy.
It's okay. It's okay.
I think you said, is it your daughter or son that's 12? Or...
My daughter.
Yeah, your daughter. My daughter's almost 12. So we're probably at the same stage with father-daughter relationships at the moment, which can be erratic and challenging at the best of times. And how do we step into their world? Because like sometimes it's very difficult to jump in there. And do I stay back? Because this sort of stuff helps me even interact with my audience as well. Yeah. Because not everyone is we know it, not everyone is the same, but I think if you can understand a child at 11, 12, 13, I think you'll be good for anyone and any audience that you can possibly have.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, I mean, I've loved the different stages of communication with I have a 14-year-old son as well. So, it's kind of, I do think, and I think maybe more so as a father than a mother. I don't know. I mean, I'm speculating here, but I think the danger, well, I found in my own experience was the danger was to try to teach, to try to educate, to encourage and to support. But I actually, there was a moment in time where I just went, hang on a second, the best way to learn is to learn for yourself. I mean, I know we all know this, but I think as adult parents, we tend to want to protect our children, and we want to,
of course,
make sure that they're not suffering. And of course, we don't want them to suffer. But I do think that art of listening. I mean, we talked about it earlier on in different contexts, and my daughter has become involved in so many different areas of social media, with restrictions, obviously.
Yes.
But and actually with quite a lot of restrictions. But actually, she, taking the time to understand her TikTok world. I mean, TikTok is something that I never really got into, or even Snapchat, and actually, and I mean, instinctively, I would have went, oh, not another thing that is going to keep her face in a screen. And she's great. She does gymnastics and drama, so she's not always there. But I do worry. Yeah. And so it's trying to find the joy for me. It's trying to find the joy in what she's doing or what my son is doing.
Yeah.
And I think that just listen. And you talked about language. I mean, and again, the pace, pitch, and volume. I mean, people are giving us clues all the time in the way that they speak and in the way they physicalize and in the language they use. And I think as humans, we're already pretty good at noticing things. It's just that when we're in work mode, we tend to forget about our superhuman powers. Before lockdown, I spent a lot of time running courses and training people, and the title was superhuman powers for humans, because I think this is superhuman. I mean, it's amazing. We can do all kinds of amazing things, but we just take it for granted because that's what most of us do anyway. And this difference between talking and speaking.
Yeah. I think it's a matter of practice, isn't it? You really have to get it into your unconscious mind or your subconscious mind, so you do it automatically. And as you're starting to speak, I'm actually starting to use the same breath as you talked, because I remember that, because there's obviously some neuro connections between what you're saying and going, oh yeah, that's how you do it. That's how you breathe, and you use the on the same breath. But it's actually just to remember to doing that, as opposed to just going in autopilot mode. And I think that's something, because we know that once you breathe well, you start to calm down.
Sure.
And you start to become a little bit more thoughtful. And I think the blood rushes to your brain, and you start to get tingles in your brain that it starts to relax you a little bit. And probably goes back to when we first started, is the that imposter syndrome. But once you start to breathe properly, I think everything just calms down a little bit.
Can I just say, we all know how to breathe properly.
Yeah.
But stresses and things get in the way, and breath goes in all kinds of different directions, and it goes back to what we were saying about the first time I did the corporate session, when someone said, this is amazing, and I thought they were just making fun of me. But actually we do need to learn how to breathe, whether that's with yoga or meditation or Tai Chi. For me, Tai Chi was a revelation. I mean, Tai Chi is known as the breathing martial art, and it's very hard not to go through these beautiful movements without feeling that your whole body is breathing with the movement. And even though I trained as an actor and I had those skills 100 years ago, things like meditation and I actually like doing yoga. I'm not very bendy or flexible, so I kind of, it doesn't always work for me. But Tai Chi and meditation, I just think are amazing things. And our breath obviously is the source of our life, and it fuels so many things. But the voice travels on the out breath.
Yeah.
And we've got to remember that, because you can talk about doing breathing exercises, working on your diaphragm and all this kind of stuff. And I would say, don't worry about your diaphragm. Your diaphragm already knows what to do.
Yeah.
Really focus on the out breath, and let your voice travel on that air, because that's where the authenticity is. That's where the truth is. And if you think about people when they're really feeling their truth, or they're really trying to connect with people, we're looking at their eyes, we're trying to make those connections, and quite often we'll slow down, and quite often we'll lengthen our vowels, because vowels are where emotion and intentions are carried in the voice. It's not in the consonants. The consonants are identifiers. The difference between pony, Tony, Sony, phony, bony is just there's little sounds, but the vowels carry the emotions and intentions. And again, as humans, we know this. Lullabies are soothing because they're elongated vowels, la, la. Or when you're whispering sweet nothings into your loved one's ear, you're not going, because that would be really irritating. You're doing the and the ahs, because that's where humans feel the intention or the emotion in your words. And I always think that people talk about, I talk a lot about pace, pitch, volume, and pause, but the fifth one, and probably the most important one, is the way that we use our vowels.
Yeah.
And I'm now deliberately elongating my vowels as I talk to you, and you can get a sense of, well, maybe I'm just being a bit more connected, or maybe I'm being a bit more passionate about it. Now, I can go back to talking like this, but remember, there's a logical side of us and there's an emotional side of us. And if I just say,
I was going to actually say, is it because our brains have a moment of distraction and a moment of sameness? Is that what you mean? So if you're always the same, but you're quite monotone and you're speaking on sort of a flat level, but if you sort of elongate the vowels and go up and down, like people from Cork, that's Cork in Ireland, everyone on the that's outside of here, that's listening to Poll today. But if you're flat and monotone, you just sound like a drone. But when you sort of, as you said, elongate your language to make it sound interesting and compassionate and wonderful, is that sort of what you're talking about?
Yeah, they're all intermovable.
Yeah.
Because you can be, it depends on the situation. I mean, if you want to give somebody a fact, you're probably better off doing it in a staccato manner. 2 + 2 = 4. The capital of Ireland is Dublin. There's no emotion there. It's a fact. The price of this product is, here are the features, here are the benefits. I mean, it can be a fact, but then if you want to make it emotional, because we know that emotions drive decisions, there's obviously, there are the logical things, the price points and the functionality, but so if you said 2 + 2 = 4, the people can understand that. You don't have to do anything with that. But if I was to go 2 + 2 = 4, even though it's the same thing, your brain kind of goes, huh? What happened there? Because it was like an elongation. So quite often we're delivering facts, but then you want to make the fact relevant to them. So yes, 2 + 2 = 4, but here's what 4 will mean for you. Here's how 4 will make life easier for you. Here's how 4 will save you money, will save you time, will save you energy. And you have that beautiful balance between the staccato-ness, the logicness, is there such a word, logicality, and the emotional. And I always remember someone telling me that salespeople, people who speak slightly faster than normal, will sell more because they have that enthusiasm and that confidence. But people who speak too fast, too much of the time, will sell considerably less. And I think it's because they remove that opportunity for vowels. Now, I'm not talking about inflection. I'm talking about elongating the vowels. And it's, if you were going to choose between this one and this one, I really think that this one is going to save you much, much more time. And then you'll finish half an hour early and you can go home and spend more time with your kids.
But that sounds really good. Can I have 2 of them, please?
Yes, you can have. I'll just send me your details and your bank account number, and I'll send you as many as you want.
Okay, that sounds absolutely awesome. So, Paul, if you were interviewing you, what sort of questions would you ask you?
Wow, I've never been asked that before. What kind of questions would I ask me?
Yeah,
I think. Well, if I was interviewing me, you see, here I am now trying to dissect what you're saying, because again, that's part of. I need to understand your question. I think this is so important for sales. It always amazes me. I'm sorry, I will answer your question in a second, but it always amazes me how salespeople will go to make a presentation or will go to make a pitch without asking the person they're making their presentations or pitching to, asking them what they want, or where would you like us to start? Because otherwise you end up going and talking about everything. And really all they wanted to know was, well, compared to this or compared to this, which one's better? So if you a little email saying, hello Jason, I'm coming to meet you next week to talk about our product. What in particular would you like me to focus on? And then whatever they say, that's where you start. And then you can bring in your other stuff. So I guess if I was asking myself that question, it would probably be, what have I learned to make things easier for other people? Because the reason, you were kind enough to call me an expert, and I think everyone is an expert in something, but isn't that the whole point of going to an expert? You want them to give you a shortcut. Now, you're delusional if you think that you can become an expert by doing the shortcut, but you do want the shortcut so that it will make your journey a bit easier and you can avoid the things that possibly went wrong for me or for you or for other people. So I think that's the beauty of it. So I've been trying to write a book for a long time.
Awesome.
It's actually become a bit of a joke amongst my colleagues, because I actually gave up saying it's coming out next year. It's coming out next year, because I think what I want to write about is the things that I've learned that make things easier. I don't really want to talk about the anatomy of the voice and there are so many books about so many things, about influence, about impact, and other people I'm sure do them brilliantly. And I don't want to just be another person doing that kind of stuff. But I look at it from my perspective. I think because of that combination of performance and corporate and other things, and also I have to say, also being a child of an immigrant coming into a country, Greek parents, and coming to Ireland and having a slightly different perspective of the world. And
I think you have it there. I think that's your book, and that's what you have to do, because you've said what your book is, and it's a story.
Stories. I mean, we haven't even talked about stories, but stories, yes, are what make the world go round. And I don't necessarily think that I've done anything special, but what's been really funny about my career is that I never really decided I would be a voice coach or a communications coach or whatever you want to call me. But I've done other things. I've had video companies, I've had agencies, I've created other environments, but I've sold them, and I've always I never left voice, but it's always been the thread that's run through everything. And I think it's the thread that runs through humanity. And I love when we were able to go to other countries, and I love seeing that when you remove the words, we're just people who think, who breathe, and who vocalize, and it's the same anywhere in the world. And that thing I was talking about, the vowels and intentions, the intentions and meaning being in the vowels, that's in any language across the world. And I think that's our humanity. If we just take the time to observe and connect and use our natural human superpowers, which voice is a big part of, that I think it's possible to connect with anybody that you and genuinely help them. You can really help people feel good, even if you don't give them what you want. And I think that's another thing about sales, is that you may not have what they're looking for, but the very least you can do is make them feel good about what they're doing, and they'll remember that. They'll remember that.
There is a famous quote in that, isn't it? It's how they, I can't remember exactly, but it is how you pass that feeling from one person to another to make them feel good. And it's that feeling that, because they fundamentally buy from you, as opposed to, you might have a product, this, that, and the other, but they're investing their time into you, because there's a lot of stuff which is the same at the moment. A lot of competition and a lot of stuff that looks and feels the same, whatever the company might look and feel like. But fundamentally, they buy from you because you're the one with the superpower.
Yeah. And COVID has really highlighted that, because people have been buying so many things online. I mean, if you were buying a yoga mat, I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of people selling yoga mats, but you're drawn to this one because maybe it's the way that it's presented, or maybe the blurb underneath it, or maybe someone's taken the time to explain to you, and you kind of feel, well, I know it's exactly the same one, and it's 50 cents cheaper or 50 pence cheaper, but I want to buy from this person because I just like the way they presented it. And I think COVID has highlighted that. And I think COVID has highlighted our humanity. I think it's also highlighted our disconnectivity, and it's highlighted so many things. And I have to say, it's really given me food for thought in this last year as to how communication needs to change, has changed, doesn't need to change. And I've been fascinated by the politics in the United States, particularly.
Oh, that's been fun.
All the rules have been broken, really, around communication. And I always start my courses by saying communication is not what you say or do or think or intend or feel. It's what people receive, and then how they feel about what they've received. And it's extraordinary when you go from, for example, from Obama, who was, put on this pedestal as being this amazing communicator, but then you look at his successor.
Yeah.
And you kind
He
of go,
has.
he's just not doing any of those things, but he has had an equally powerful effect on that particular audience. And you really have to begin to look at that and understand why. So I think a lot of the rules have been thrown out the window, but we all have that ability to connect and engage vocally on the most human level, and recognize that we're talking to humans.
Yeah.
Machines can do all this wonderful stuff, but at the end of the day, we're still selling to humans. We're still talking to humans. We're still engaging with humans. And I love that. I think that's the most brilliant thing that is going.
I think you've got a fascinating area. I think I'll just ask you one more question because I'm in a time warp at the moment because I'm fascinated in this area.
I'm sorry. Every time you ask me a question, I talk for hours.
No, I know that. But I like that because you're adding so much value and so many sort of golden nuggets along the way that the audience are going to love and take from it, which is exactly what I want to position this podcast in, audio and visual, because I want people to actually see you as well as hear you, because I think that's important as well.
Yeah.
And the question I was going to ask, and where is your learning? Where do you keep on learning? Because I know we spoke just before we got on, and you were saying you're fascinated between the Cork accent, and then there's a direct correlation between that and the Jamaican accent, and I found that quite fascinating and made me start to think, wow, you've just come across that. And where do you keep deep diving and learning from in this?
Well, I heard that from I was at a conference in Las Vegas 15, 20 years ago, and this woman came up to me and said, have you heard, now you've caught me on the hop here, but have you heard of this poet? And she said, a very Irish name. And I said, no, I haven't. And she said, well, he's our national poet. And she was from Jamaica. And he came as a missionary, I think, from Cork. And she started talking about the accent. And as she was talking, I was going, oh my God. You know, when you think of Cork, for people who aren't from Ireland, you know, there's a Cork accent and it has that kind of a thing going on. And if you just move it slightly and it becomes Jamaican. And I'm sorry for anyone from Cork and Jamaica where I'm generalizing your beautiful accents. But they have this amazing lilt, and you can actually correlate it. And also you can correlate a Northern Irish accent to the southern states in the United States, where a lot of people went pre-famine. But you have, you know, the down there kind of Northern Irish sound, and you think of that lilt that you have in some. I love that. I mean, the reason I got into other things like video production or neurolinguistics or emotional intelligence is because I got a little bit bored. I have to be honest with you. I got a bit bored with doing what I was doing. Not bored as in I didn't want to do it. I've always loved it, but you know, I just needed something else to observe in people. And I thought, and actually also because initially my background was in film and theater, so I was working with performers who already understood the need for technique and skills and continuous practice. So when you're working with people in a corporate or sales environment or a non-performance world, you have to find a way to explain that without talking about the creative stuff, you know, that you're doing it because you want to discover more about your inner voice. And that doesn't wash with a lot of people. So NLP, for example, and other neurolinguistic processes really helped me to find a way to explain that to people who weren't in the performance world. And then when I trained in EQ and emotional intelligence, that also gave me another insight, because again, probably going back to the question you asked me was, well, I think a lot of voice coaches talk about it in a performance context. And I think again, observing where the person is. If somebody is not artistically inclined, doesn't matter how majestically and beautifully you explain it in terms of creativity, it just means nothing to them. So sometimes you have to be more logical, more practical, more pragmatic, and create a structure for people. And I love that adaptability. And I love the idea that just because you were successful in a pitch last week and you're making a similar one next week, it's a different audience, and you have to be in the moment and you have to be able to respond. And I think that's why the biggest mistake I think people make is that when they're preparing something, they try to learn it. And they're doing this they're going into their brain to recover what they've learned. And you haven't spent 4 or 6 weeks like actors. By going into your brain and memorizing or taking the stuff you've memorized out, you're now putting almost like a wall in front of your audience, because you need to be speaking and you need to be looking for the clues and seeing their reactions and seeing what they're interested in and noticing that. And I think whether you do that vocally or through body language or through micro expressions or whatever thing you're studying, but I think that's what saved me from getting bored, is that I feel, well, what more can I learn to help me observe the reactions of other people so that I can shortcut their learning and help them to become better at what they want to be much, much quicker and much, much more effectively. They still have to do the work.
Of course.
But I think that for me has always been the curiosity and the joy is just what more can I learn to help them more.
I think that is a very predominant note that you've actually just said, because the more curious that you are, then the more that you can help people, because then you're asking about them, and the more you ask about them, they can tell their story, they can talk about themselves, and the more they do that, you're using your emotional intelligence by your literal listening and your understanding of their language and stepping into their shoes. And the more you do that, I think you become persuasive by just listening and understanding and using that in your favor, because that's powerful, I think. And I really, this has been an absolutely wonderful podcast, Paul, and you've given loads and loads and loads and loads of golden treasures in here, which I know people are going to add and take lots of value out of this. How can people find more about you, Paul?
Well, you can go to voicecoach.ie, or you can, which I can see is coming along here. There's also voicematters.com. And actually on both those websites, you can click on a good old fashioned newsletter. And I always promise people it's not going to come at you more than 5 or 6 times a year. But I'm always happy to hear from people, and I love hearing other people's stories. And so I'm happy for anyone to track me down.
Really, thank you so much. This has been absolutely all inspiring. So you've listened to the Global Sales Leader podcast. I'm your host, Jason Cooper. You'll find a little bit more in the show notes afterwards if you want to engage with Paul. He's phenomenal. I say I've been on his course and I learned a lot, and I'm still learning a lot. And it definitely helped me, and I'm sure it definitely helped you. So thank you once again, and very much appreciative for this wonderful hour that you've given us.
Thank you, Jason. I've really, really enjoyed it. It's been a pleasure.